particularly hard, reporting yesterday a record two-day total of 1,042 coronavirus deaths. Skyrocketing caseloads there are threatening to force hospitals to ration care and essentially decide who lives and who dies. About 1.9 million people around the world have died of the virus, more than 360,000 in the United States alone. December was by far the nation's deadliest month yet, and health experts are warning that January could be more terrible, since still because of family gatherings and travel over the holidays. The results of a new study suggest the age group of people who are more commonly affected by the new variant of COVID-19 that was found in the United Kingdom and has since spread to some locations throughout the United States is under 20. The new strain is more transmissible than COVID-19, although it is not believed to be more harmful to the human body or resistant to vaccines and treatment. That highly contagious COVID variant, first seen in the UK, has made its way to Texas, and one person has been identified in Harris County. House Democrats, furious over the invasion of the Capitol by a mob, are preparing criminal referrals to the Justice Department to request that President Trump and some of his top advisors be investigated for inciting the violence, which also looked at a range of other options that include impeachment and invoking the 25th Amendment. President Trump faced the threat of a second impeachment a day after his supporters breached the U.S. Capitol in a stunning assault on American democracy as Congress was certifying President-elect Joe Biden's victory. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called for President Trump to be urgently removed from power, branding him a very dangerous person who should not continue in office. And it is a Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar who has officially introduced articles of impeachment against President Trump. President-elect Joe Biden has denounced the rioters who stormed the U.S. Capitol as domestic terrorists and blamed President Trump for the violence that has shaken the nation's capital and beyond. The riot by Trump supporters who breached the security of Congress was not dissent, it was not disorder, it was not protest, it was chaos, he said. A U.S. Capitol police officer has died of injuries sustained during clashes with this mob of President Trump supporters who overran a session of Congress. It was the first law enforcement death stemming from the violence at the Capitol, which saw flag-waving crowds overwhelm police and break into the legislature. 4 protesters had died earlier, including a woman who was shot by police, and 3 other deaths were reported on the Capitol grounds. Donald Trump's top National Security Council officials and a deputy White House chief of staff considering resigning over the president's encouragement of protests that led to his supporters storming the U.S. Capitol. U.S. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund resigning, according to the official statement. His resignation is effective on the 16th of this month. And Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao has resigned from her position, making her the first member of President Trump's cabinet to do so. She is married to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos has submitted her resignation, saying President Trump's role in spurring the mob that breached the U.S. Capitol was the inflection point, making her the second cabinet member to resign over the incident. Facebook and Instagram extending a ban on President Trump's accounts for at least the next 2 weeks until the presidential transition is completed. This according to Chief Executive Officer Mark Zuckerberg. President Trump for the first time acknowledged his defeat in the election and announced there would be an orderly transition on the 20th of January. He conceded to President Joe Biden, condemning the violent supporters who stormed the U.S.'s Capitol in a video message. And President Trump conceded publicly this for the first time that he will not serve a second term, stopping short of congratulating President-elect Joe Biden, but acknowledging a transfer of power is now underway. President Trump has suggested to aides he wants to pardon himself in the final days of his presidency, a move that would mark one of the most extraordinary and untested uses of presidential power in American history. Some in Texas are calling for Senator Ted Cruz to resign after his vote objecting to Arizona's electoral votes. Texas's 2 U.S. senators voted differently on the certification of the Electoral College vote. And both John Cornyn and Ted Cruz are Republican, but Cornyn voted against that measure to object to Arizona's electoral votes. The Texas Democratic Party responded by setting up a petition calling for Cruz's resignation. Elon Musk, who surpassed Jeff Bezos to become the world's richest person, says he's selling all his possessions. And we'll tell you why. I have a special segment on him coming up. Last year, one of the 2 warmest years on record, tying with 2016, which was the previous warmest year. For Europe, it was the warmest year on record, 0.4 degrees Celsius warmer than 2019, which was previously the warmest year on record for the continent. World leaders have reacted with horror to the chaos that has consumed Washington, describing the insurrectionist attempt on the U.S. Capitol building as disgraceful, pitiful, and shocking. An arrest warrant issued for outgoing President Trump in connection with the killing of an Iranian general and a powerful Iraqi militia leader last year. And a South Korean delegation has arrived in Iran amid tensions following the seizure of a South Korean oil tanker and its crew by Iranian forces in sensitive Gulf waters this week. The countries whose citizens were killed when Iran accidentally shot down a Ukrainian jetliner have said today they want Iran to deliver justice and make sure Iran makes full reparations to the families of the victims and affected countries in this joint statement marking the one-year anniversary of the Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752 crash. Ukraine, France, Canada, Britain and Sweden said they want Iran to provide a complete and thorough explanation. The United Nations fears massive community transmission of COVID-19 in Ethiopia's troubled Tigray region, fueled by displacement and the collapse of health services. And Ethiopian Christians living in a refugee camp in Sudan have marked Coptic Christmas in exile, desperately praying to be reunited with loved ones and return to their conflict-hit homes. The United Arab Emirates announced it would reopen its borders and airspace to Qatar after boycotting the tiny energy-rich country alongside its Gulf allies since 2017. Turkey and France are working on a roadmap to normalize ties, and talks are going well, according to Turkey's foreign minister, adding that Ankara was ready to improve ties with its NATO ally if Paris showed the same willingness. And in news out of Paris, French Prime Minister Jean Castex has said restaurants, cinemas and museums would remain closed throughout this month and ski resorts might not open before the February holidays as France cranked up its vaccination rollout. The European Union secured a deal for an additional 300 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine developed by Pfizer and BioNTech in an attempt to enable member nations to ramp up their vaccination programs. And over 1.1 million people had COVID-19 last week, equivalent to 1 in 50 people in the nation. This according to the UK's Office for National Statistics, rising to 1 in 30 people in the capital of London as this contagious variant spreads. Tensions are rising around Thailand's pro-democracy protests, with 6 people shot last week and police using tear gas and water cannons on the streets of Bangkok. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un explored ways to renew inter-Korean ties and vowed to expand diplomatic relations as he hosted a rare party congress less than 2 weeks before U.S. President-elect Joe Biden takes office. Washington may sanction those involved in the arrest of over 50 people in Hong Kong and will send the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations to visit Taiwan, drawing anger and the threat of retaliation from Beijing. Bitterly cold air swept across the Chinese capital of Beijing, sending temperatures to their lowest level in decades. Flight services between India and the UK resumed partially today after being suspended for 16 days. An Air India flight carrying 256 passengers landed in Delhi from London a little while ago today, and the government had suspended these flights on the 23rd of December in wake of the new and more infectious strain of coronavirus. But flight operations from India to UK restarted, while services from UK to India also have resumed. The Delhi government tightened the COVID-19 protocol for passengers arriving from the UK at the Indira Gandhi International Airport by ordering mandatory institutional quarantine, even for those who test negative for the disease. The number of people who've tested positive for the new UK variant has climbed to 82 in India. And India's daily COVID-19 count dropped to nearly 18,500 a day after the tally had crossed the 20,000 mark, even as 3 states continue to report higher than 1,000 new infections. The centre has asked actually 4 states recording a surge in COVID-19 cases, Maharashtra, Kerala, Chhattisgarh and West Bengal, to maintain a strict vigil and take steps to curb the recent spike. Union Health Minister Harshvardhan hailing the scientists and doctors for their work in the vaccine development and said the vaccines will be provided to the people of India in the next few days. Prime Minister Modi will inaugurate the 16th edition of the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas tomorrow in a virtual event. The Pravasi Bharatiya Divas is held in the country every year to sustain and nurture the symbiotic relationship between India and its diaspora. The 8th round of dialogue between the government and 41 farm unions representatives remained inconclusive. Sticking to their key demand of the repeal of 3 farm laws to end their protest, farmer leaders today told the government their Ghar Wapsi can happen only after law Wapsi, but the centre insisted talks must be limited to contentious clauses and ruled out a complete withdrawal of acts. Border crossing points to Delhi from Haryana and Uttar Pradesh continued to remain closed for traffic today due to the ongoing farmers' protests against these 3 farm laws enacted in September to liberalize the sector. We do have the scare of avian flu or bird flu spread to about 6 states in India, and Steve Smith's typically gusty 100 was neutralized by Ravindra Jadeja's 4-wicket haul and rookie Shubham Gill's fluent half-century as a resolute India reached 96 for 2 after dismissing Australia for 338 on the second day of the 3rd test today. And a Pakistan court has sentenced Mumbai attack mastermind Lashkar-e-Toiba commander Zakiur Rahman Lakhvi to 15 years in prison in a terror financing case. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all that I have in the news for you